You started in 2016. When do you think you started making the shift towards the enterprise level customers?
A couple years in, we were working with a company called Xometry, which is a sort of marketplace that gives you opportunities with a bunch of different places. 2019 probably is when that started to kick out because we kind of grew together. Like they had an IPO and went pretty crazy growth since then. But where we both started was like at the very, very small stage of things, right? So we started mutually with smaller customers and then, sort of leverage their sales team to go out and get these enterprise level customers. And then there's understanding how to measure, different level of parts. And now you're in GD&T and things like that. So after right about that 19-20 mark, we got into more and more of that as time went on, and then I would say it kind of ramped up from there. But that was how it started, and that helped us get our feet on the ground for sure.
Welcome to Making Sparks, the podcast where we ignite your passion for metal fabrication and fuel your business success. Join industry leaders and dive deep into the world of metalworking. From business insights to tips of the trade, Making Sparks is your forge of knowledge. During each episode, discover success stories, innovative solutions, and expert interviews that light the path to business growth. Subscribe today and grow and improve your company, and let's make sparks fly together.
Welcome back to Making Sparks. I'm your host, Casey Velker, sitting virtually with my co-host, Matthew Nix, who's actually really only like upstairs, but he said it'd be really weird if we filmed together in this Airbnb. So there's that. Anyway, we got a great guest here. I'm going to let Matthew introduce him because they actually have a lot of, I think, synergies and the way that their businesses have grown. I think, yeah. Let's go with that. Matthew, introduce our guest.
I am really excited for our guest that we have on today, Jesse Kleiman, and he is also a fabrication shop owner, has had some outstanding growth, and looks like he's built one heck of a business. I'm really looking forward to hearing his story, and I know I'm going to learn some things from him today. I always love these kind of episodes. Always have one or two takeaways from these guests, and many of which I've already implemented in our business. So Jesse, hope I can steal a couple ideas from you today, but excited to have you on, and just share a little bit with the audience about who you are and your background, and then we'll get rolling.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. It's always fun to talk with similar-minded people that also, on top of that, are in the industry doing the things. So that is always a pleasure, and happy to kind of play a little game of ping pong back and forth with how we can help each other out for sure. That's why we do this stuff, right? So, yeah, I am Jesse Kleiman. I founded JR Metalworks, as Casey was asking about here before the episode, in 2016. Fast forward a little bit here to 2025, where we're at today, founding with just myself and a part-time guy or two from time to time, basically. Now in 2025, we're about 70 people strong, and that's just in time for me to have just rolled across my 30th birthday. So definitely some big milestones through all this, and happy to dive into that more. But I just started with a whole lot of nothing, as far as nobody has any money at like 22 years old or whatever I was at the time, right? But through the sweat and the refusal to quit along the way, I would say, that enabled me to accompany myself with a bunch of great people that, all together got us here. So
that is outstanding growth. That's really, as someone who's in the industry and has also grown quite a bit, I mean, that's really like eye-popping growth to think about going from a startup to where you are today. You know, we grew pretty substantially too, but I had a foundation to start with. It was my dad, my grandfather, and my aunt were all working in the business, you know, so it had been around for a while. It was just 3 family members, but I think we had a jump start and a foundation, whereas you had to start literally from scratch. And so absolutely incredible to go from that to 70 folks. So yeah, I mean, we could talk all day about all the challenges associated with that, but yeah, maybe let's start there and jump in. Like what have been some of the biggest challenges associated with growing at that kind of a pace? I mean, there's a couple that I think always come to mind, but I'm just curious what you would say there.
Yeah, I would say I have to preface this with, I feel that, you know, I had one distinct advantage that I don't know the math behind it, but I can't not bring it up, and that's that I had a backing from my parents in how I was brought up, not financially, but in how I was brought up, that allowed me to have the grit, the fortitude, the, you know, all the mental things that enable you to survive a growth process like that. They, you know, by just being who they are, sort of imparted that on me. And so I will say, if I am readily admitting any sort of advantage over anyone that I may have, it's that I just had a stellar pair of parents that, you know, actually both work at JR now. But, you know, growing up in my dad's marine repair shop, on top of the fact that they were just super awesome people to start with, that gave me, you know, the customer service, and it gave me the, hey, we're going to work till midnight tonight because the customer needs it type of expectation leveling that you need to have, you know, before you walk into something like this and have any sort of an idea what to expect. So I did have a little bit of an idea what to expect, because that's how I grew up. But, you know, like the things along the way, the tactical things like knowing how to fix my own equipment, which wasn't very good when we got started, right? You know,
Yep.
having learned that from my dad and learn how to be a people person from my mom, those things carried me through. And so to not sort of recognize that, I think would be a little bit unfair and self-righteous. So I always try to, you know, be real honest with people about, like, I don't know how many people have that opportunity, to be honest with you, but I kind of won the lotto ticket on that one.
Hey guys, it's Nick from Making Chips, and I gotta tell you about our new show, Lights Out. When someone talks about being lights out, what comes to mind? For me, it's Michael Jordan, he's got the ball, the game's on the line, or it's Leo Messi taking that ball up to take a penalty in a penalty shootout. These guys are elite, and they're unstoppable, and you just know they're not gonna miss. But I also think about the technology, automation, process, and most importantly, the mindset of the manufacturing leaders with the best shops in the world. Every episode will equip and inspire you to run lights out so you can sleep soundly while your shop never stops. Because we all know, if you're not making chips, you're not making money. So check out the new Lights Out podcast by Making Chips. I will see you there.
Yeah,
Well,
no, that's a
and-
fantastic point, Jesse, and I share those sentiments with you too. And it's sad that, you know, that's kind of becoming more of a novel thing, right? I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. You know, that's really what makes a great, you know, nation or civilization, right? Is when parents are there to raise up the kids right and show them the right way. And it's really been eye-opening. We're very blessed. We live in a small, rural, kind of agriculture-oriented town. A lot of multi-generational families here, a lot of good people, and that's probably more normal here. But my eyes have really been open to that as we've grown our employee base and 220 team members now. And you start to realize, like, to your point, Jesse, it's like, wow, this is not necessarily the norm to have that kind of upbringing. And folks that didn't have that luxury. And what an advantage. I say that you're, I think, the only podcast guest we've ever had this conversation with, but I say all the time, like, I think if you grew up with parents that just loved you and you had stability in your household, you probably have like a 90% chance of success. I mean, it's just such a massive, massive contributor that's often overlooked. And so
I always
really
joke,
cool.
my mom was just like a lot of moms were like, you're going to be whatever you want to be when you grow up. Like she would say that. And she ran her own business right here on Main Street for a little while. My dad always said it made us broke, but whatever, and my dad worked, 40 years or so in HVAC and retired from the company that he basically started out of college. Right. But I just want to say, Jesse, like, kudos to you for even taking the time just now on this podcast to give your parents a shout out, because for me, it's like, as I get older, the more I realize it. When I went to my dad's retirement party, I never knew what he did. I knew he worked on air conditioning. I knew sometimes I'd be at the elementary school and it'd be kind of cool when we were walking to lunch, and my teacher would be like, "Hey, your dad's over there." I'm like, "Oh, hey, Dad," talking to him through the fence as he's working on the big old air conditioning unit. But I never really thought about it. And then I started doing videos for our local trade school, Ivy Tech Community College here, and he teaches out there. And the guy who runs the HVAC, I went up to him and I said, "Hey, we're doing videos. My dad works here. He's a professor or whatever you want to call him." And he goes, "Who's your dad?" And I said, "Fred Velker." And he goes, "Oh, I got to get up and shake your hand." He's like, "That is just one." He's like, "That's just one heck of a guy," or whatever. And I was like, to me, it's like really cool to hear that. And then again, as I get older, taking a step back and saying, "Man, I was really lucky." Like I was, just like you guys are saying, I was really lucky to have two parents that, one was entrepreneurial, one was hardworking. One built us skateboard ramps that introduced me to a camera that got me into doing video professionally, for hopefully the rest of my life. Right. And so, but then also just taking the time to be aware and just be self-aware that like you wouldn't be here without them. And I think that's my digression there. So,
yeah, there's a great lesson for those of us who are parents as well there. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jesse. So let's dive in some of the challenges along the way associated with that growth.
Yeah, so like I said, they gave me a lot of the mental tools and the character traits that you need to sort of be as ready as you can for something that you can't be ready for. But the whole money thing, when you don't have any, and then to get started, you take on debt, and that's new to someone like me who had sort of been taught as I grew up to just buy everything cash, and but to do this at any scale, I guess it's not that it's impossible, but I just didn't have any money, so that's the options that I had. So basically I was traveling all over the country building stainless pools for a while. That was my first independent gig. I was a sub to the GC and maybe a sub under that even. But that was my first gig, if you will, and that got slow. And so sort of simultaneously, I was looking for other opportunities to work, because I'd go on site for a couple weeks at a crack usually, and then you come home for a couple weeks at a crack, and I cannot sit still. Like, it just doesn't happen. So I was looking for things to fill that couple weeks with, other than mischief. So I did find a couple opportunities, kind of like gig work, if you want to call it that, for little fab jobs. A lot of repair type stuff, all the stuff that naturally kind of comes to a guy in that phase with no shop or anything. But along comes an opportunity to weld gas carrying pipe, and simultaneously the traveling pool work slowed down. And so, I didn't have really any options in my mind, because I was dead set on doing my own thing and I needed a thing to do. So yeah, I will definitely get started welding this gas carrying pipe. Have you ever welded gas carrying pipe before? No, but I will figure it out. So that is honestly how that whole thing started. And so it's sort of laughable now, but that nope, but we'll figure it out thing has been a huge part of what led to like the really pivotal growth moments along the way. So we can talk about that more. But, you know, doing all that, there was a lot of uncertainty there. And once I got going with that, now I could show them that I could do the work. I got purchase orders in hand, and that allowed me to have something to go to the bank with to say, okay, I need a shop, the welders, you know, the things. I had accumulated some welders and stuff like that my dad was gracious enough to let me keep in his home shop through high school, because that's what I did with my spare time mostly. But, you know, then comes inventory and, you know, terms and all these things. And so, you know, managing all the finances when you're starting from literally less than zero as far as a balance sheet shows kind of deal, you know, that is challenging. And I'm a builder, you know, that's where I started. I've had to learn all the other aspects of running a business along the way. And so when you have to figure it out, you do. But you start there, and then as Matt, you know, when you grow so fast with taking on all that extra payroll and all these extra jobs that it takes to do that, the costs out of pocket that you have to float to be able to do that is immense, right? So navigating the relationship with the bank and making sure that the orders are going out, things aren't getting, you know, stuck somewhere in the middle waiting on customer, you know, confirmation of FAI too long, stuff like that can just completely kill your cash flow. And so learning how to manage that has definitely been one of the biggest challenges when you're trying to grow that fast. If it happens a little more naturally, that can help a lot because it gives you a little more recovery time, if you will. But, you know, that's just not how I roll. I like to go fast. I like to be intentional. I want to get to A, B, and C. And if I'm thinking 5 years, then all right, fine, but how do we do it in 2? You know, that's just kind of how my brain naturally works. But that causes a lot of things that have to be managed simultaneously. So I would say the first thing is all those different benchmarks of you know, business size that you experience through there, and managing cash flow all the way through there is definitely a challenge. And then probably after that, I would just say, you know, learning the finer points of, you know, how to do sales well at the magnitude that you have to when you get up to that volume. You know, that was certainly, it felt like it just fell into place when I found the right resources. But at the same time, that was something that wasn't super familiar to me. You know, I worked in my dad's marine repair shop where we handled the transaction of the work. There was some tackle there to sell, so on and so forth. That's one thing, kind of a B2C type deal, right? Well, this is a whole different industry, and you walk up to enterprise level customer and they could just ask, well, why should we do business with you? And you better have a damn good reason or two, you know, because otherwise they won't just tell you to step off, but at the same time, they'll know that you're not ready for their work to manage it well by, you know, mitigating their risks and making sure that their, you know, production or whatever is applicable to them is not getting impacted by taking on a supplier that's not quite ready for them. So that was a lot to learn.
Hey guys, it's Nick from Making Chips. I want to give you 3 quick reasons why you should check out Mike Payne's podcast, By the Numbers. Mike, my good buddy, my partner on Making Chips, is full of wisdom. He's full of experience. He's full of what it takes to buy, sell, and lead a business, specifically a manufacturing business. So all the numbers that you should be focused on to improve your performance, that's what he's the master at. The second reason, Mike's the first person I call. If I'm looking at a new idea, a new partnership opportunity, a new acquisition, any new initiative where I need to dive into the numbers and figure out how to approach it, Mike is who I go to. And third, you got to love that buttery Tulsa King voice that Mike rocks. It just soothes your soul. It gives you the confidence to elevate your leadership. Jokes aside, if you love making chips, or if you're just passionate about improving your business performance, and the financial performance of your company, check out By the Numbers by Making Chips, hosted by my good buddy, Mike Payne.
When did you make the shift from more of, I guess, individual clients or smaller time B2B clients to more like enterprise level clients, probably OEM type clients? When did you make that shift along the way? Because that's a big transition for most organizations. I would say, you mentioned managing cash flow, which I think a lot of great operators, I started out just like you, blue collar operator, no formal education, and a lot of operators I think are really great at that, but they get into trouble because they can't manage the administrative side of the business, or at least they don't, at a minimum, don't recognize and sort of, hey, I know what I don't know kind of thing, and I better bring some people in around me that can help manage that side of the business. So it seems like you figured that out early on, and you found a way to manage that. And so now you're getting yourself in a place. We've got the finance and the administrative side of the business at least shored up adequately. Maybe it's never quite where we want it to be, but it's adequate. And now we're pushing the envelope to bring on these blue chip kind of clients. So when in the journey did you do that, and maybe talk about what that looked like? Because I think that's a big inflection point for moving from a small business to medium-sized business.
Yeah, I think that for us it was a little bit unique in that it was a sort of mixed bag along the way. So there was an opportunity sprinkled in here or there that led to like kind of a ramp up to where at this point we actually make a point of approaching them and trying to be ready to approach them with a very well packaged, about us packet, all the paperwork that you need to get going. And that is a far cry from just having these things sort of accidentally sprinkled in along the way because they just wound up in a spot where they were trying to find somebody. And, I think that we had a good enough website where every once in a while we would be able to take a crack at entertaining a client like that, because that's usually how they found us. So I would say, it was not sort of on purpose in the beginning, but that gave us enough opportunities to sort of figure it out along the way. And again, now we have, when we approach a customer, we are very much pushing the info to them. And we really break it down by one way or the other, as far as you're going to be enterprise level or what we call small business, and we approach them very uniquely, different documents, different sequences, because really in a nutshell, enterprise is like, show me X, Y, and Z up to and including a facility tour that allows me to see and verify that you're ready for this. And small businesses kind of like, yeah, well, let's do paperwork, if we have to, but right now I just need this order done. Can you get it done? Yep. Okay, here's the PO, So they're almost like backwards. So These are the things that we've learned along the way. Not that you're not aware of this, but just to kind of like give the full context to how we see it. And so now at the phase that we're at, we're approaching enterprise level customers, with these types of things in hand and ready to go, but that certainly wasn't always the case. We sort of just got to learn what they were looking for along the way, and then it developed into that type of an approach. But we're all about, I would say, with sales, we're sort of casting the net out there and being proactive and not just sort of waiting like we used to. But for a while there, we just had to make sure that operations could have a good repeatable product coming out the back door. So, if customers came in, that's fine. But that was where a lot of time had to go to make sure that we had a good service and product to then be able to offer over the long haul and then tell the world about it. Because if you do that the other way, it sort of really expedites the process to failure.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I love what you mentioned too about how you approach what you call the enterprise level customers and the small customers, because I think if you get either one of those backwards, it can be a problem. And so like with recognizing with the large customers that it's a long sales cycle and there's a process you have to go through. And so in the meantime, you probably still need some small customers to fill in the gaps. And even at the scale that we're at, we need lots of small customers. I mean, you just need that to fill in the gaps. And so, but it's recognizing that the way you approach or sell or onboard customers like that is much different. And if you make it real bureaucratic and, they got to jump through a lot of hoops to do business with you, they're just going to go do business somewhere else. And so, I think there's a great takeaway in that. So you started in 2016. When do you think you started making the shift towards the enterprise level customers?
Yeah, so I do bad with remembering like exact milestones as far as time frames because boy, a lot happened quickly.
Yeah,
but I would say a couple of years in, we were working with a company called Xometry, which is a sort of marketplace that gives you opportunities with a bunch of different places. And doing that presented a much higher volume of these. So maybe 2019 probably is when that started to kick out because we kind of grew together. Like they had an IPO and went pretty crazy growth since then. But where we both started was like at the very, very small stage of things, right? So we started mutually with smaller customers and then, sort of leverage their sales team to go out and get these enterprise level customers. And then through their marketplace operations, we were able to build out our systems with, frankly, a lot of help from them to where we could have those conversations. We could manage the work. We could do a AS9100 document correctly. We could have the AS9100 cert to even start with, right? And then there's understanding how to measure different level of parts, and now you're in GD&T and things like that. So along the way, after right about that 19-20 mark, we got into more and more of that as time went on, and then I would say it kind of ramped up from there. But that was how it started, and that helped us get our feet on the ground for sure, because we both were hungry for growth, and so we were happy to facilitate the work that they had coming in, and they were looking for somebody to do it. So
that's cool to hear. You had sounds like some great success with the Xometry. I'm familiar with them. We never worked directly with them like you did, but that's really cool. Sounds like that was a good move for you early on, particularly early on. And it sounds like you guys really worked as more of a partnership as opposed to just kind of a contractual type relationship.
Yeah, and I would say that's what we're looking with every customer. So they're unique in that they're like one customer that offers a bunch of different opportunities with a bunch of different places. But like at the end of the day, you're really looking for that same type of alignment with your small business customers, your enterprise, and everything in between. And so naturally things go well when you're in alignment with the softer side of business, like the core values and just the how you agree
Absolutely.
to treat each other. But not only that, but also the like, hey, again, I do kind of one speed and it's fast. So you want customers that are looking to kind of go along with that.
Yeah, if they move slow and you move fast, it doesn't work, or vice versa. I appreciate that sentiment too, because we are actually on a big campaign right now too. We've really slowed our growth down, and now it's like I would put it like this. It's like you wake up one day and you go, wow, we've built this big machine. What if we just wrangled the thing and ran it really well? And so that's really the phase that we're in right now. And so my brother's vice president of business development now, and we were talking the other day, and we started doing customer satisfaction surveys. We wanted to do that for a long, long time. So now we actually have a system and a process for how we're doing it. So we had this project, and our customer gave us shitty remarks on this satisfaction survey. And so he starts digging into it, and our customer was the middleman between us and the end customer. So he digs deeper and he goes to the end customer, and the end customer is just raving about product was great, your people that came on site were great, blah, 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 everything was great. And so, he keeps peeling the layers of the onion back. And it turned out that just this middle customer that we had was relatively new, was just going to be really hard to please. And I said, forget that, just fire them. I mean, life's too short for that. I mean, if we make mistakes, believe me, we make plenty of them, but let's focus on that. Let's not focus on trying to please some asshole that we're just not going to be able to please. So fire him and move on to the next one. And I think too many people are scared to do that. And, time and energy is a finite resource. So you might as well deploy it to your point, with customers that you align with. Everybody's better off for it. So great point, Jesse, for bringing that up.
Matthew, I think the first big customer, Nick's got was kind of like, I remember when we did the 100X podcast, and you talked about they not only were they, knowing that you guys were newer in this, but they were willing to give you guys a little bit of grace to help you do the work. And that was important too, right? Like that you were learning it.
It was more than important. I mean, it was absolutely necessary. Yeah, we took on a contract that doubled our business overnight. We were doing $500,000 in annual sales at the time, and we took on a $500,000 contract. And so the customer knew that we had to work together as partners. For us, if we were not successful, they were not going to be successful. And if we were not successful on this job, we were going to go bankrupt. And so they worked right alongside us the whole way. And, it was a win-win for everybody. And so, I would have never taken on a project like that if it wasn't with a partner customer like that. And that's everything from payment terms, right, to, maybe the technically speaking, it says you can't invoice till it ships, but what if their customer's holding up the shipment and they're saying, we can't stick this little company with that. Well, hey, go ahead and invoice me. I know it says you can't invoice till it's shipped, but I know it's done. It's sitting in your yard. It's those little nuances that people don't think about. Contract language versus who are people that really want to work with you and understand that in order to be successful, we both have to be successful. So really important.
Yeah, we've had to navigate the situation that you just described with, really it comes down to every customer. You have those things happen is what we've realized. And so what we're in the process of doing and already doing to some degree on a less formalized basis is, again, our interaction with customers, new and existing, is really trying to switch to like a fully proactive model where we're going to try to continue to reach out so much until they say it's too much, and then we'll know where we need to stop, right? But when we get on board with a new customer, even just as a prospect, right, we have that package documents that I mentioned in there. Forever we will be building this document that they get, that's essentially a survey that they send back to us and basically tell us their intentions of how they want to do business. And we learn a lot from that because we get the, unfettered approach that they plan to take before we're too deep in it with them to sort of have to just deal with whatever they want to do.
That's great. So, great idea.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's a start. But here's the other part that I think is equally as important. That gets followed up with conversations that also expand on that document where they put some of the stuff, but from that we'll then say, how would you handle this? This has happened how would you deal with this? And, and you talk to the group of people, which is only as good as, they decide to act at the end of the day. But you have an opportunity there to ask some really specific questions about how they do things. And typically, they're going to tell you mostly based off of historical examples how they do it. And that's your opportunity to decide if that's somebody that you think you should work with or not. That's up to everybody to make the call. But what you have to be able to do things like that is enough leads to go through and be able to say, I don't necessarily need to just take whatever comes in the door. And so going back to, how our approach has evolved through the years is like, that's number one, is making sure you have enough leads so that you can evaluate things like that. And so we're always looking to expand on that process and do a more thorough job. And that comes from the things that you run into over time. But again, I think where a lot of people don't realize that they're kind of stepping off the starting blocks with the wrong foot is they're just waiting to see what happens as opposed to being proactive and saying, hey, what about this? How do you do with this? What would you do in this scenario? And whether that's working on leadership skills with your team and doing role play, to make sure that you're on the same page with how you're going to deal with A, B, and C, or dealing with a customer, that's how you can determine whether that alignment is there or not, or develop it if it's not, because maybe they haven't thought about it and now we can go through it, but you can do that or you can wait. And one of the things that my dad taught me, I remember sitting in a pickup truck driving to wherever we were, and he talks like this when he's excited about something, which I think I have adopted into my own sort of way I do things. But he was explaining to me, and I'll never forget it. You can't sit there and wait. If you need something and it's important to you, you have to go out and make sure that it happens. At the end of the day, once you have enough life under your belt, that there's only so much you can ultimately control. But if you just do that and you do that to 100%, you find that you wind up holding the bag going, what the heck happened? Way less, So,
yeah. Amen.
So that's the approach.
I want you to teach a course to all our project managers and operations managers about that.
I could learn something from him.
Oh my gosh. It is that was a gold mine right there, buddy. Yes. If you don't sit back and it doesn't mean being rude or disrespectful, but you can be assertive and you can control the narrative and go out, and whether it's you need something for the customer or whether you got a problem that you got to communicate to the customer. I mean, you've got to be proactive. You've got to go out and get ahead of these things and make it happen. Yeah, I like to say you can will it into existence. I mean, if you really think that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't know how freeing of an experience that is until you've done it a bunch, and then you can just look back and compare how you used to do things and those results, how you do things now and those results, and you find that the latter is way better when you're just being proactive in general. Have you seen the movie Secondhand Lines by chance?
I haven't. I'm going to make a note of that. What was it?
Oh, no, sorry. It's We Bought a Zoo. The movie We Bought a Zoo, which Secondhand Lines is a great movie too. But there's a movie called We Bought a Zoo. And
I think I have maybe seen that, but I'm going to look that up.
Perfect. So you may or may not remember this part, but this is like what this all boils down to be the catalyst to make all this happen. So the dad, I think, is, if I recall correctly, trying to give a little pep talk to his son about how to ask this girl out or something. And he's like, all you need is 5 or 10, I don't remember the number, but it's 10 seconds of courage. Let's just say it was 10 that he used. And whether it's 5 or 10 doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, what we know is just it's a handful of seconds worth of just mustering up the courage to say, hey, I've got this thing that needs to be dealt with, and let's deal with it. Whether that's asking the girl out, or that's, hey, I got a thing on this part that I'm really not sure you're going to like. You can send it out there and just wait and hope they don't complain, or you can be like, hey, I'm not sure about this. Can we talk about it before, it's already in your hands and now we've got a big problem, but that's all it comes down to is just having the courage to reach out and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And being proactive. That is great stuff. But I do want to jump back the conversation we were having too before that about, just being partners with customers. And I want to give an example and flip the script. So it goes the other way too with one of our vendors where they're acting that way with us. And, we have payment terms with the vendor. We spend millions and millions of dollars with this vendor, and we've got great payment terms with them. They actually went so far because when we get slow paid from a customer, right, you're floating, sometimes millions of dollars of materials you're floating, and all of a sudden you're not getting paid, but you owe the vendor. I mean, that can be a very bad cash flow situation. And so they actually went so far as to tell us, hey, look, they're owned by a massive corporation. I don't know if they're publicly traded or what, but they're owned by a big company. They said, here's when we report our numbers up. And as long as you're within terms on that day, every quarter, we're good. And again, this is a long time relationship too. You don't just wake up one day and have that level of relationship. But so our CFO and their CFO, they're talking constantly, and he's and I guess really this weaves two conversations we've had together. It also works because we're very proactive with them. We don't just miss the due date on the bill. It's like, hey, we've got this big, payable out there, and just letting you know that our customer is telling us it's going to be, 2 weeks more before we get paid. Yep, no problem. Just keep us informed, let us know, and as soon as we get paid, we pay the bill. And that's an arrangement that we've made on the front end. But I mean, it has allowed us to scale our organization in a way that we couldn't have. And, we've got other vendors that might come in and be a little lower at price at times, but, you have to look at the big picture and how we work together. And so we've created loyalty with that vendor because of that. So just a good example. I think of both of the points that you made, real life examples. So.
Yeah. I'll give a shout out to Alro Steel because they didn't do the like, hey, this is when we report our numbers thing. that's pretty next level. But through our growth, they have always been very willing to, just listen to the scenario, go through whatever needs to be discussed, and then do things in a way where we can mutually wind up both profitable at the end of the day.
Yeah.
With positive cash flow. And so, there's a handful of them that I would say we really, don't have anybody that's bad on the vendor side, but there's a handful that really stand out and approach it like a true partnership. And I think they're certainly one of the tippy top for us. And so, hopefully this winds up helping them. They're nationwide. So
sure. Yeah. We buy Alro at times as well. Yeah.
Who doesn't, right?
Yeah. Big organization. Well, that's great to hear. We've talked a ton this morning about like practical, tactical tips, a lot of great stuff in terms of scaling your business. All the talking points we wanted to cover with you are more on the culture and value side, which we haven't even scratched the surface of yet. So I want to propose we do a 2-part episode here, and let's dive into that next, because we're coming up on the time here. We try to keep them within, but anything as we wrap up this episode, just kind of within the context of practical, tactical tips for scaling your fabrication business from startup to where it is today. Anything else you'd like to share that you feel like we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I would just say it goes back to what my dad told me in the pick 'em up truck that one day, which is, and my version of it is be on purpose. I think if you're on purpose at life across the board, again, things just have a way of going in your favor. And so that means in business, do it with a plan, think through, as I always coach all of our leadership team up. If you're going into a meeting, what are all the things that can happen and how are you going to deal with it? That should all be sorted out in your head prior to ever walking in that room. I don't care how long it takes. You're going to be glad you did that, if especially it goes south somewhere halfway through. So if you're on purpose, things just naturally have a tendency to work out, and that's a tune that I think applies to everything. And if you do that, then hey, maybe things don't just work out well for you like they have for me so far, you know?
Yeah, amen to that, brother. Yeah, I love that. Be on purpose. Yeah, I totally agree. I try to live that way too. You know, everything from how you plan out your calendar for the week. It's like I always say, you can either take control of your time or somebody will take control of it for you. It's up to you. You can decide.
Matthew, I mean, you said, well, I don't know, one of your newsletter things that I always actually has stuck with me a lot is just because you're intentional doesn't mean you're not genuine. All right. And that's kind of the same thing. Like, just because you're doing this with a purpose doesn't mean that like you're.
Yeah, I was referring to, well, yeah, it's all related. Yes, I was referring to building systems and processes for cultural initiatives or trying to practice appreciation, be better at showing appreciation. That's what I was referring to. But it speaks to Jesse's point. Like, so I'm not naturally not like a what's the word I'm looking for?
Lovey-dovey.
Well, yeah, that too. But no, like in the moment. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Spontaneous. I'm not like good at like just being spontaneous with like appreciation and recognition. But it's important to me, and I'm being on purpose, to Jesse's point. So I built systems and processes around, like, you know, I do handwritten cards once a week. I've got a list and send them out. And that was what I was saying, is just because you've been intentional and built a system around it doesn't mean it's not authentic. So you gotta be on purpose. So great advice, Jesse. This has been an awesome conversation. So folks, if you've enjoyed this episode, hearing from Jesse, then please join us on the next episode, because we are going to dive into the culture side of his business, and he has got just as many great tips and takeaways, I can assure you. I've already read some of the quotes that he's had, and so it's going to be a great conversation. It's also a topic that I'm very passionate about. If anybody follows me on LinkedIn, you know that corporate culture is something I'm deeply passionate about, and so it's going to be a good conversation. So we'll wrap up this episode and see you on the next one. So Jesse, if you're not making sparks,
you ain't making money.
Boom.